You're listening to Go2Him with Alan Corbett and Nick Catt. This is a place where we aim to promote men talking about their mental health. We hope to get you guys thinking and more able to express yourselves to perhaps make your lives just a bit better. And maybe we might just make you laugh along the way. Welcome to Go2Him. This is our grief episode. We have both got experience of grief, and we felt that it's necessary that we do an episode with just us. The rest of our episodes will have guests on who are experts in their fields and experience. We have both very different experiences of grief, situationally. We just wanted to share that with you.
Grief is something that everyone will experience or have experienced, whether it's themselves. You know, I certainly have experience from losing a friend and the grief that caused, but you see the knock-on grief as well. You see your loved ones watching you grieve. It makes you question about your own kind of grieving behaviours. There's that age-old response of, oh, he's grieving, which means you can get away with certain behaviours but not others. And there's also kind of grief that you see where, you know, perhaps your parents have lost their parents and you watch them grieve like children.
Yeah,
you know, and it's something that we all go through, whether it's something you experience directly or you watch other people go through. It surrounds us. Everyone will experience it. This is something that we've decided to do on our own because I don't think you need an expert. I think it's hard to be an expert in grief because everyone does it differently.
Exactly, and the experience is different for everyone. There's no real... Sounds like an awful thing to say, but there's no real end to it. You always grieve, but you learn to live with that grief and your life changes around it as opposed to being affected by it all the time. You just change over time. Everyone's experience of it is really different. We could probably have got a grief counsellor on here to speak to us, but even then, they probably wouldn't be able to get it. No one can get across how you are going to feel when you lose someone who means a lot to you. No one can tell you how you're going to feel, because I know certainly in my experience, I thought I knew how I would feel because my dad's illness was a long time happening, but I never in a million years realised how I would feel and how it hit me hard.
And you'll never know when it's going to come and get you either.
No.
You know, you could be fired 1 minute and then you know you'll be with some friends in a pub. You'll be 5 pints in and then wallop.
Yeah.
The grief's got you.
Yeah.
You come out of the toilet and you're crying mess and your friends are like, what's up? Ah!
Yeah.
I'm sure most people that have been through grief have been there. It can get you at any time. Some stupid advert will come on the TV and, I don't know, it would be for like a Head and Shoulders. You'd be like, wow, my dad used Head and Shoulders. And bang, it will get you. And it's almost like a reset button that keeps hitting you.
You could be doing something completely innocuous, like completely sort of unrelated to anything, that, you know, really innocent thing. And because, you know, like sometimes when you're doing something mindless, you know, like you're doing some housework or something, doing something around the kitchen, and your mind just sort of wanders off of what you're doing. And for an absolute split second, that person will come into your mind and that will ruin you for the rest of the day. Just a split second.
Yeah.
And that'll be you done.
Yeah, that's completely relatable.
Yeah.
You know, when I still go to get my phone out to text my mate when I hear something.
Yeah.
You know, oh, I know we like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's it. I'm thinking about him for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
And I experience that grief again. Okay, it may not be as strong as it was or as sad as it was, but it's there.
Yeah.
And I think you're right, Alan. It's not something you ever get over. It's something you learn to deal with, and you come to some kind of resolve in your head over time with a number of things.
Yeah, yeah. So just for a bit of background, my dad passed away September 2021 from cancer. He had bone cancer in his leg, which very slowly spread to his lungs and the rest of his body. And it's a bit of a long story, really, which I probably don't really need to go into, but he was iller than he led me to believe. And so when it actually happened, I had no idea as ill as he was. He'd gone into hospital. He died. He was literally in there 5 days, I think it was. And then he passed away on the Friday. It was almost like I was grieving before he'd even gone, because his speech was so bad that it was barely understandable, and we assumed it was medication that was doing that, but it wasn't. It apparently found out afterwards it was because the cancer had spread to some nerves in his throat or bit near around that area. I mean, I don't really know. I was told by the doctor that it spread around that area, and that's possibly that was causing him to slur. But it was, yeah, I mean, I don't know with you, because yours was very different to what I went through, because there was almost like a lead up to mine.
There was definitely a lead up to my one. However, one of the reasons I'm here is because of the lead up. You know, my friend committed suicide almost 5 years ago, which caused a whole manner of grief. You know, just feelings that I'd never experienced before, and watching my friends go through that experience, we all learned more about each other as a result. But what we failed to see was the lead up. Someone doesn't just do that on a whim. There is a lead up. There is an illness that happens before someone makes that decision. And that was part of the grief for me, not recognising enough, not being able to prevent it. That was probably the initial strongest kind of bit of grieving I'd done. Why didn't I do more? Why didn't my friends do more? Why didn't his loved ones do more? I had to grieve that and go through certain different stages of grieving before I could start to actually come to some sort of resolve in my head and actually grieve the loss of a friend. You know, because the circumstances around it were so new to everyone around me, I didn't know how to grieve it. No one knew what to say to me. And you know, my parents, they were just as shocked as I was, and they wanted to obviously help me through my grief, but they have no experience of it, and most don't, thankfully.
Yeah, no, because thankfully, that kind of thing, you know, with a friend committing suicide like that.
It wasn't until a counsellor who told me to make sure I take the time to grieve the loss of a friend. As soon as I got told that, I went there. Yeah. Instead of trying to resolve why it happened. And
could you have done anything or seen anything when you clearly...
And going through the obvious ones of being really pissed off with him for doing it, leaving his son behind and all of that. Each stage was long as well. You know, it's 5 years ago almost, on December 1st. But, each stage was long. Yeah. It took ages.
And you could never know that you're going to feel like that.
No. And you think you're all right. You think you're okay. Yeah. And then, wallop, it just gets you. And for me, I realised that I was still grieving when I'm in a bit of a state. I've drank too much. Yeah. You know, it comes out then because you've buried it and you haven't dealt with it. You've literally buried it. You've thrown some booze down your throat and it goes, oh, hello.
And it's coming out in your worst time possibly to be able to deal with it constructively or in an appropriate way because at that point you're drunk.
Yeah. Or you're at the end of a 3-day bender and you're like, why am I behaving like this? Yeah. What am I doing? And then you start to look for reasons. Like, am I a wreckhead? Yeah, I'm a bit of a wreckhead, but I'm not that much of a wreckhead. And then you go, right, this is really still bothering me. Yeah. It really is still bothering me. And that's when I decided to get help. 3 years after it happened. Yeah. So I've done 3 years of questioning stuff. Yeah. And it coming to get me like that every now and then. Without talking about it and not talking about it, and that was my biggest mistake. That must have been
really hard because I it's a typical bloke thing, but I do talk about things quite a lot. I do talk about my mental health stuff, more than most blokes because long story short, I resolved to not really care what people think anymore years ago. Now it's one of the best things I ever did. With my grief for my dad, I do talk about it when it happens. Mostly to Nicola, and I'll say, I just feel really sad about Dad today. And then because she's like she is, she just change the subject and she'll, in the nicest possible way, she'll change the subject and then she'll talk about something as positive as possible. It's a complicated situation to sort of, because you do want to talk about it. You don't want to bother people too much, but then I think that's a bloke thing. You don't really want to just be sort of like harping on about the same stuff all the time that you're going through. But at the same time...
Which is the basis for our podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Right? And it's a really hard... But then I guess it's all part of the learning process with this. And I think that kind of thing will go. I mean, certainly, in the beginning, right at the start, I actually... Because I felt so awful, I actually resolved to literally just let things happen. I just decided that I would not try and hold anything down. I decided I would feel how I wanted to feel and I would feel how I was feeling. If I felt that I wanted to talk to someone about it, I talk to you, or talk to Nicola, or talk to other people, even like my kids, just chatting to my kids about it, because even though they lost someone, their experience of it is different to mine. You know, to a certain extent, Nicola lost him as well. They were never really close because, you know, that's just how my dad was. But me and my dad were as close. I think I was as close to him as he could get to someone, because he wasn't like that. He wasn't a very loving person, but he was in his own way, and I think I appreciated that as I got older. I sort of just decided to just be. I just decided to be as much as I could to, you know, let things happen. I mean, it's like the story I always tell everyone, and I told you this, but for the sake of the podcast, we actually started Nicola, actually my wife, actually started calling them episodes. Alan's having an episode again. It was actually quite funny in the end, because she would call them one of my episodes. And like the first one I had was so I'm a massive Beatles fan, and I was watching the Let It Be documentary on Disney Plus, which I absolutely love and savoured every second. And I just remember it was really weird. I remember I got home from work one day, and that was literally my routine. I would get home from work and I would just watch as much as that I could get in. I just remember just sitting there and thinking, just for the, like I said before, the splittiest of a second, oh, Dad would love this. Yeah. And I was a mess. Absolute mess. I don't have so many of those, what we call episodes anymore. It does happen, but it doesn't happen so much. And I don't know, maybe it's because of my resolve to just let myself be myself and things to happen.
And I think
I'm not bottling anything up.
No, exactly. And I think it's a really good thing, especially if you've got kids as well, because we all learn from our parents, and we spend a lifetime learning from our parents.
Yeah.
And I never stopped learning from mine, that's for sure. But I think when your kids see you show emotion, see you go through grief, they learn how to do that themselves. You know, they're almost prepared for it. My situation, the suicide, was definitely something that I've grieved the most over anything. I've lost grandparents and grieved them, and that kind of naturally, they all live to a ripe age. You can deal with everything a lot easier. And I had a fantastic relationship with them. I felt like I got everything out of my grandparents I ever could. Yeah. But yeah, losing a friend and having to have that conversation with children about suicide, because I didn't want to sweep it under a carpet.
No.
This is what he did. He took his own life, and he'd done that by jumping off a beachy head cliff. And you know, that's a way of making sure that you're going to do it properly. You're not going to come back from that. And obviously they have questions, and you know, it was around Christmas time as well, so it was a rough time, and they were good. They were supportive, and you know, they now know, and you know, they're 16, 13 and 8. They know what suicide is. It's not a taboo word in our household at all. It's something that my oldest certainly is quite knowledgeable about, and you know, he's not shy about talking about his feelings. And you know, we quite often discuss the unbalanced male to female ratio of suicide. You know, the male suicide is a lot higher, and we talk about why that might be. And you know, I think that's a healthy conversation to have. It's a dark subject, but it's a healthy conversation to have.
Absolutely. It exists, and they have to know it exists. Thing is as well, what you don't want to happen is for them to get to a certain age of adulthood or whatever, or early adulthood, find out about your friend from somewhere else, and think, hang on a minute, this is a big thing that happened to Dad. Why did he not talk to us about this?
Yeah,
as you don't want that, because you know, for loads of other reasons, you need them to believe that you're always going to be open with them. You know, I know it's a horrible, big, massive thing to happen to anyone.
Yeah.
But at the same time, kids have to know that this stuff happens.
Yeah.
You know, and the key to it, I guess, is telling it to them in such a way that suits them as a person, which you are well set to do as their dad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was he? Do you mind me asking? Was he a similar age to you?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, so a year younger than I was.
So that in a way that adds to it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because psychologically, we're hardwired to believe that the people who die in our lives who are close to us are going to be older than us. They're gonna die of old age. And if they die of something other than old age, they're still going to be older than us.
Yeah.
So that adds to the whole impact.
Yeah.
I guess, for want of a better way of putting it.
And you know, around the subject, and we have a suicide episode planned at some point. But to add to that subject, there were a lot of people, older generations, would say, well, it's a very selfish act. Now, you would never say that about someone who had cancer at that age.
No.
You know, it was selfish for them to get cancer. But what people fail to recognise, that it isn't a selfish act. They're sick. They're unwell. They're mentally unwell. It's different to being physically unwell, but it's still an illness, and it's something they don't have control. Well, you know, and that's their last bit of control. That's the last bit of control they have, and they make that decision. Yeah. You know, I wouldn't ever like to be in that headspace. It's a rotten old thing to hear when someone says, "Oh, what a selfish act," and when you know that you don't understand the illness. But that's the way of the world, right? And I think that's possibly why there are more men that commit suicide than women, because as men we're led to believe we don't talk about our feelings. You can't be sad, so we bottle it up, and that's why I believe, and it's opinion, not fact. That's why I believe there's a higher amount of male suicides than females, because of the problem we have where men simply feel they cannot talk about their emotions and feelings.
Can you imagine being in that headspace where you can't think of any other way, you can't think that there's anything you can do at all, literally at all, in your life to fix the way you feel, other than literally not existing anymore?
And that's exactly it, fixing the way you feel, right? Because he had a lovely wife, a new son, a lovely house, a great job. He had everything that anyone would say, like, you should be happy.
But that compounds why people say it's a selfish act.
Yeah.
Because they would say, I mean, you know what it's like. I mean, you know, I grew up in the 80s, and, you know, I was a kid in the 70s, and you would hear people talking about suicide and saying how, oh, he had all this. He had his whole life ahead of him. He had a lovely car. Look at that. Look at his wife he had. Yeah, but you don't know how. There's no way on earth that you could have known how that person felt in order to come to that conclusion.
Yeah.
That is the only thing left. It is never a selfish thing, because if people took the time to really consider how awful you must feel to come to that conclusion, just doesn't bear thinking about.
No, it's certainly a place that I tried to get to try and understand, you know, the mentality behind that, without like actually sending myself down a dark path. You know, I felt like I needed to kind of understand the mentality of someone that makes that decision in order to come to a resolve, to stop grieving my friend. Because if I could understand it, I could crack on and move on with life. And I remember, I wasn't dealing with it well, and I remember getting up one Sunday morning, 7:30, and I drank half a bottle of wine, just because I knew I'd feel all right after that. And I'm there thinking, this is the sort of behaviour that he used to do. You know, this is what he done. And I immediately text his wife, who I have a very good relationship with, and said, look, I'm in a dark place. You know, I helped her through the horrible stages after it happened, and we were very close, and I just needed to lean on her. She was there. She's been through the grief. She knew how I was feeling, and she just reminded me that dark places lead to darker places, and text her every day. Don't go there. Don't get yourself in that dark place. And that was me just trying to deal with it, because you think differently after a drink. You know, you almost feel like you think better
Yeah.
But it's destructive.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and that, you know, that's why we all have a beer on a Friday after work.
Yeah.
Because you think better. That's better.
Yeah.
But you don't. It's
And
you
also,
just think differently.
if you do binge and then the come down after that binge, you're going to probably feel worse than it was before, whatever it was that made you make the decision to have that drink.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be dealing with things as well, are you?
No. And for me, I couldn't sleep properly. So it's like, fucking drink some wine. Yeah.
Yeah.
That will help.
Yeah. Oh, my God. It's horrible, isn't it?
It's
horrible.
It's grim. It's a grim subject.
Yeah.
But it's, like we say...
But it needs to be spoken about.
Yeah.
Everyone always says about the 7 stages of grief, which I find really interesting, that there are actually... It's only actually... I thought it was bullshit. I thought it was like one of those sort of things that you sort of just read about, you know, like in a trashy magazine you might pick up in a doctor's surgery or dentist or something.
Are you grieving?
Are
and
you
answer
grieving?
A, B,
Yeah,
and C,
exactly.
And you get a score of 79.
What stage?
Oh, you're really grieving.
Yeah, exactly. Which one are you on now? Oh shit. Well, I think I'm in denial. Okay. Well, oh Jesus. Therefore, denial.
No, you're not.
Are you doing this? No, you're not. No, I'm not. I'm not in denial. I'm shocked. I'm shocked that I'm in denial. But it is actually true, because if you read up on the 7 state, it's weird actually, because some places you read there's actually 4 stages of grief. Other places you read there's
That's
7
denial.
Yeah, exactly. You're denying those 3 stages. There are, as far as I'm aware, 7 stages of grief, and the first one is shock. Now that's more sort of apparent to you than it was to me. Although there was shock in mine, because, like I said, I knew he was very ill, but I didn't think he was as bad as he was. I had no idea that, because he'd given me information up to that point of him going in hospital, where he didn't tell me that his cancer had spread. So I thought that it was only, he told me that it was like little tiny bits in his lungs, but he told me all along in the 10 years, however long it was that he had it, that if it does spread anywhere, it only goes to your lungs. Now, I don't know how true that is now. It doesn't matter anymore, but I don't know how true that was. When he first died, I had a lot of chats with his doctor, his specialist. I said, well, what was the cause of death? And she said, well, it had gone here, 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 here. And I thought to myself, he would have known about all this.
Mm.
So that was the element of shock to me.
Yeah.
You know, it was, it wasn't a slap round the face shock, but it was actually, to be fair, I mean, looking at this, it was a shock. It was actually the third one, his anger, actually. And it almost seemed like I had the anger, because it goes shock, denial, anger for the first 3. Now, it actually felt like I had the anger almost immediately that I had the shock, because he wasn't honest with me. So I was really, really pissed off with him that he didn't tell me any of this, because, yeah, I couldn't have done anything about it. I was under no illusions that I could have helped. I could have been there for him, which I was as much as I could up till that point when he passed away. But I would have loved to know what was going on. At the time, I was angry and shocked at the same time. But looking back now, no, it just wouldn't have mattered, because it was going to happen, and it wouldn't have mattered what he had wrong with him. He was going to die. The second one, with your shock, with your one, it's very apparent with the shock.
Oh, yeah, immediate shock, obviously, the obvious shock.
Yeah.
But the day after it happened, because he wasn't found till the day after, I made a number of phone calls to a number of my friends to deliver that news, and every time I delivered it, that shock was slapping me in the face again.
Because you had to verbalise it.
You had to verbalise it, yeah, and tell one of your Croydon friends, my closest friends, they're family to me, and having to deliver that news, and a lot of people didn't know the extent of his depression either. So it was a double shock. They're like, what? Why? He had everything. It's just like, well, he hasn't been kind of in a great place for a little while, but we didn't know how bad it was. But yeah, on the day that we all found out, between 10 and 15 Croydon boys all went and met up in a pub that we like drinking in. The first initial hour or two, we just sat round the table looking at each other in complete shock. You can't ordinarily shut us up, especially in a pub. But we were quiet. We looked at each other, we shook our heads, and we went, what the fuck? Silenced us all, and that was shock. And seeing so many shocked faces, like physically shocked faces, it's something that we'd never
And
experienced.
that'll only add to it, because that is probably an experience, seeing all your closest family-like mates in that state. You've never seen them in that state before.
No.
And because you're all blokes, even if they'd even felt 1% of that before, you'd have never have known.
No, absolutely.
So
not.
that adds to the shock, because then you're sitting around a group of really close, lovely mates that you love to death, and you're seeing them in a state like that. That's only going to add to your shock.
Oh, yeah.
Because
yeah.
it's not just, it's just occurred to me that it's not just the shock of losing that person. It's the shock of the reactions of the people you love around you. You're not going to have experienced that before.
The people that you would go to be like, look, I'm not having a great time, lads. Right, what can we do? Everyone in the same boat.
Yeah.
So, and we immediately started drinking to help with the shock, right? And it took a little while for people to start opening up.
That is the shockiest of all the shocks you could go through, I think.
Yeah.
Unless you know someone, well, in a way, it's a similar kind of thing if someone has a terrible accident,
Yeah.
I guess.
And you repeat
But I don't
that
know,
shock.
because it is a massive, massive shock.
Yeah, and you repeat that shock. You go to bed. You're able to sleep. You wake up for a split second. It's not on your mind, and then boom, you're
Bang.
like, oh man,
It's there again.
yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
That's it. Your day is dictated from that moment
Yeah.
because of that shock.
Yeah.
So you just live that shock
Yeah.
for quite some time.
Yeah, it's like I've spoken to you about before, when I've had experiences of like quite bad anxiety, where it's like you just said, very true. Like for a split second, you wake up and you're in that sort of like just having woken up 2 seconds probably, where you feel all right and everything's cool and you're relaxed because you've just been asleep. And then all of a sudden, bosh,
Yeah.
it hits you hard. And then your whole body goes into proper like rigid mode,
Yeah,
because suddenly everything,
and all of a sudden you're exhausted again.
yeah, you
Immediately.
can't get up.
No.
You've got no motivation. Even though there is motivation, there's never any enough motivation for you to get out of your pit, even though you've got to get up and sort kids out. Or when it happened, did you get time off work? Did they give you time off work?
They offered it. So it happened on Friday. We found out on the Saturday. I told my boss on the Monday. He said, take however much time you need. It's like, no, I just want to crack on. And we flew to Vegas on the Tuesday. I thought that was, at the time, that was the best thing to do. Get away from it all. It was the worst thing I could have done. Sin City, you've been to Vegas. All I saw on that trip to Vegas was the mental health issues that exist in Vegas, because it was everywhere.
Yeah,
right?
it's just not a real place.
No,
is it?
it's not. You see some really horrible things if you're in that frame of mind. And what I should have done is take time off work and get mentally better. But I thought going far away would be the best thing to do. It was the worst thing I could do. I spent the whole time I was there a complete mess and living in Sin City. So it was easy to escape.
I can certainly
my
see how that would have
horrible
been
thoughts.
awful. Yeah. I can't think of anywhere worse.
Middle of a desert.
But yeah, middle of the desert.
Yeah.
A place
on a
where,
work trip.
Yeah, on a work trip, away from your family, anyone in your family.
Yep.
With someone you know probably quite well, but actually you probably wouldn't class them as a proper mate. So they wouldn't know you as well as they needed to in your circumstances.
Well, it was a boss. And again, both blokes.
Yeah.
I don't want to show this side. He doesn't want to see this side, because
No.
then we might have to have an actual conversation
Yeah.
about how I'm feeling.
And also
neither of us
admitting
want
that to a boss.
Yeah.
That's in your back of your head.
Yeah.
Subconsciously, you're going to be thinking career suicide.
Yeah, exactly. Excuse the pun.
Yeah, sorry. Oh shit. So, but it, subconsciously, you're going to be thinking, I don't really want to admit that I'm a weakness.
Yeah, and
You know?
it happened. We went to a party together, and it was an open bar. I stood at the bar and drank and drank and drank and drank. I felt better. I thought, right, okay, I'm enjoying this now. On the walk back to our hotel, which was only across the road, but still about a 5 kilometre walk,
Yeah.
because that's what that place is like.
Yeah.
We get to the bridge, and I just have a complete meltdown.
Yeah.
And he's just like, don't do this here, don't do this here, please don't do this. And I was like, but why? And I just offloaded on him, and the next day I got up, and it was it's awkward.
And I actually probably overthink things more about being upfront. Even though, like I said to you before, I stopped caring about what people think years ago about my mental health and stuff. But I'm still mindful about them, if that makes sense. Because if I ever don't speak about it, it's because I don't want them to feel uncomfortable. That's what it is. I don't want to be forcing them.
I want to always avoid having that conversation with Sharon in Southport,
Yeah.
who knows what I've been off through ill mental health, and she'll go to me, "How are you?" And I'll be like, "Yeah, I'm really good." And she'll go, "No, how are you really?" Like, I said, "I'm fine, Sharon."
Yeah.
Right? You almost don't want that.
No.
And how are you really?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, my health isn't your concern, Sharon.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
settle down.
You want
Sharon.
it. You want those questions, but in an appropriate sort of like setting. You know, I know there is that thing about ask twice, and I totally 100% agree with it. Always ask twice. Yeah, you don't really want that from Sharon in sales support.
No. You know, you don't want to sit in there thinking, "Oh, I better do this because I don't want to cause another
Yeah,
episode."
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Don't want him. So, did anyone know about the bridge incident, or was it just you and your boss?
Just me and my boss. Yeah, it haunted me for a little while.
I bet.
Yeah,
Bloody hell.
it did, but it needn't. It needn't.
No,
be, you
no.
know, and it was probably part of the whole grieving.
Well, that sounds like a really stupid thing to say. In any way, having that massive like blurt out, did you feel any kind of like relief from that?
Nope.
You didn't?
Not at all. No.
No.
I just felt like I felt worse, to be honest.
Oh, really?
And I just wanted
so
to
like
get
it was
home
like
even
the
more.
tip of the iceberg, and
Yeah.
you needed to be somewhere where you could express yourself like that, but feel more comfortable about doing it. Well, the good thing is that you did tell people. You know, it'd be easy to sort of imagine blokes to get into the mindset where they wouldn't want to tell anyone at work what's happened.
No.
And they're just going to try and style it out. Because I can imagine that happens all the time.
Well, I mean, coincidentally, there was a lady that worked on our team. She lost her boyfriend in the same way.
Oh, God.
So she was quite good to lean on because she'd been through it.
I thought we were supposed to be doing comedy stuff.
Yeah, well, tough subject.
Yeah, it's dark.
So,
It's dark, man. It's
so
dark.
what's the one after the shock? It's denial.
Denial,
Right?
yeah. Yeah, that's... it's that river in Egypt.
We'll edit that out.
Yeah. But bump. It says... So the thing I read, it says the person you lost was there 1 minute and not the next, making it not feel real at all. They've been around all your life. Yeah, see, that's a difficult one for me because my dad wasn't. So I don't know if I really had denial. I suppose, I don't know, did I have denial with the fact that, like, I didn't know he was as ill as he was? No, because I believed it once I found it out. There was no reason for me not to believe it because he sounded awful and I knew he was... I don't know. I didn't know he was as ill as he was, but it made sense afterwards. Did I have to know? I don't... maybe I had... No, I don't think I did. I'm really trying to think, did I have denial? Maybe it's important not to, with the 7 stages of grief, maybe it's important not to totally believe it, that there is a 7 stages of grief. Do we have to, do we have to have gone through all of them? I think certain circumstances you can't have denial, surely.
I definitely had denial. I still get little bits of denial about it now. Denial was kind of quite immediate for me. After the initial shock, spending time with his wife, in the following days, in the back of my head, it's like, well, because we reported him missing, we reported he might be quite unstable, and his car was found near Beachy Head with a suicide note, would they have just assumed that the body they pulled out was him? And is he hiding somewhere?
Yeah.
Is it something that hasn't happened? How do they know it's him? And that kind of way of thinking was definitely in my head. It's not really him. They've made a mistake. It's not really him. And I remember having a conversation with her, and she initially had that. So denial is definitely one that I experienced, but short-lived. Definitely.
Oh, of course.
That was definitely one of the
I would
stages,
imagine,
yeah.
though, with people who are, to do with suicide, people who commit suicide, denial is always going to be an issue, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Especially in those circumstances of your mate.
Yeah, and I think probably...
Where someone that he doesn't know or goes and finds him, there's always going to be that shred of doubt in your mind that they've found the right person, isn't there? It's natural.
And I think it will always be there as well. I think it will always be there. Like when you lose anyone, you expect to see them walking down the street. You'll be like, whoa!
Correct. I see
Always an element of denial.
old geezers, quite a lot, bald old geezers, like similar height to my dad. Now, granted, my dad had quite a limp because he only had a leg and a half. Sometimes I see like old geezers like with faces like my dad. For a split second, I think that's my dad. Split second. And then I'm thinking, no, it's not. But then I sort of feel a little bit sad afterwards.
Yeah, like we say, you you forever grieve someone that you lost. And
Yeah.
I think that these things just come and go, don't they?
They do.
These different stages.
Maybe. I wonder whether these things are. We're hardwired to do this stuff because we're sort of drip feeding ourselves the pain. We're drip feeding ourselves it so that we don't feel all the pain all at once, all of the time. So, over time we drip feed ourselves it so that we can somehow. Maybe it's a evolutionary trait that the human race has. I don't know. Maybe I'm looking into it too deeply, but it makes sense to me for us to be drip fed.
Maybe you're in denial.
Maybe I am still in denial. Yeah, maybe I am. The third one is anger. I think that it's easy to say as men we would try to keep this hidden, and that we only want to be able to vent it to somebody trusted who would have seen us angry before. So, for instance, I've got a bit of a temper. That's just how I am. You've seen me on the side of the football where, every single time I was on that side watching the boys and I'm standing a few yards up from the Oppo coach, I'm not Alan. I go into Coach Alan.
Your anger has only ever entertained me.
Yeah.
Your anger has only ever made me laugh.
Yeah.
I've never seen you angry about anything important.
No.
And I don't think you and I have ever been angry at the same time on the side of the football pitch. Now we've both been through anger. Mine's generally at the Oppo's manager or stupid linesman or something.
Yeah.
I don't ever remember when we're both there being angry at the same time. Maybe cup final day.
Well, yeah,
both
cup
kicking
final
bottles
day.
about, but
yeah, or maybe for the sake of the podcast, I can't mention anyone's real names or a football club, but where we were playing against someone at our place, that little short fella who was the manager decided to say that you were a moany or a moany fucker. Was that his actual words?
dickhead, I think.
A moany dickhead.
Moany old dickhead.
Yeah, moany old dickhead.
Yeah.
Decided to tell you that right at the end. He'd had plenty of opportunity to tell him you in a nice way.
Whilst grappling my hand and pulling me close.
Yeah, because you'd gone over to him to shake his hand, to be nice. And I guess that's the only time when you and I have both been angry, because he was kicking off at you. It was completely unfounded. And it was because he was kicking off at you. It was then I lost my shit and walked over to him to try in an angry way to reason with him.
It's kind of eased my anger because I found it funny. Just the whole situation.
It was funny though, because doing the football, you
see a lot of angry men on
see a lot of
Division 5 Sunday morning football.
Yeah, grassroots, watching their 14-year-old boys playing football.
Pent-up aggression.
Aggression that they never got to under 14 to play football in the 5th division. And it's I don't know. That's something we're not going to have anymore, thankfully.
Yeah. But anger's not always about shouting, is it? Sometimes, and for me personally, anger's an inner emotion. And God, I'm glad I haven't vented it at times.
Oh, see, that's where I go wrong. I keep it in and keep it in and keep it in. But I think my vent is very much sooner than yours. The time between getting angry and venting is very much shorter than yours.
And I use the supermarket as an example.
Yeah.
Because I not anymore, but I used to really struggle with supermarkets, and it always seemed to be me that would have a trolley bashed into me. And, I was already angry when I've walked in the supermarket because I didn't want to be there. And, I'll have a trolley bashed into me, and someone would say to me, "So I'm really sorry I didn't see you there. I'm 6'2". Right? So in my head, I'm going through all this kind of like, and I just turn to him, "No problem."
Yeah.
And then I get round the corner, it's just like, do you know what I should have said? I should have said, "You what?"
Yeah.
And start replaying this angry scenario that I will never actually play out in my head.
I used to be very much like that, too much like that. And so I don't know when it was, a certain part in my life, I don't know, actually it might have been when I turned 40 actually, I got to the point where I thought, right, I'm sick and tired of being in situations where I feel like I should have said something. I hate that feeling of having wished I'd said a certain thing. I hate it. So consequently now, if I have meetings at work, I tend to speak up quite a lot because I hate the feeling of not having said something.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that that's entirely constructive thing to do, because I would say 2/3 of the time it probably is. That third of the time it isn't. That's when I will be angry with myself and hate myself for it, because I just wish I'd kept my gob shut, because you just come across as an angry, grumpy bastard.
With the shoe fits, mate.
Wow. Yeah. Number 4, bargaining.
Bargaining?
Yeah. It
Ooh.
says it's the coming to the conclusion of what if. What if you'd done things in a different way that might have stopped things or made things easier for them? What if you'd known more about their condition or been more of an advocate for them as a spokesperson for them? Powered by a feeling of hopelessness and helplessness, where you would...
That was the big one for me.
Yeah.
I knew he was unwell. I didn't know to the extent. That still lingers now. When I sit and think about it, especially coming up to December, which marks the anniversary, because he first had a bit of a episode in October. So there's certain things that happen in here, like it was Halloween weekend. He just disappeared for a little while, and we found him, and he was all right, but obviously not. As Halloween looms, that reminder comes in.
Yeah.
I think, well, Halloween to December was a long time. What more could I have done? And that's the one that still lingers with me now. That, like we've repeatedly said throughout, grief doesn't stop. You learn to manage it, and you
live with it.
You live with it, and possibly don't spend so much time thinking about it. But that one mixed with denial, where I will quite often think, like, if only I'd done this, if only I recognised the signs of that day when he was so happy in the morning, because I was due to see him later on that day, and if only we pushed more for help, because he was getting help but it wasn't enough. If only we pushed more for help to get him that help, then this wouldn't happen. Who can we blame for the reason that happened that didn't give him enough help? And that's where the denial comes from. It wasn't me, it was them. And the truth is that all that is exactly this. The stages, things happen, right? And you only know how to deal with something by we learn. We as humans, we learn as we go along, and everything's different, and we learn from a really early age by, I'll use the word mistakes, but it's probably the wrong word, but from a very early age we get up on our feet, we touch stuff we shouldn't, that's dangerous, you're told no. And so we learn by doing things wrong. That's how we learn. And I'm not going to say that I did anything wrong because I know that I didn't, but there was certainly the what ifs over and over again, and that took ages. You can take blame, and you blame yourself, and you think, well, if I did this but I couldn't do that, and then you start hitting those other stages again. The denial.
See, that's the thing that it doesn't say here, but I would argue like that. I would argue that these don't. I don't think that this comes in an order.
No, absolutely not.
I really don't, because let's face it. The next one is depression, which I would argue is right from after the initial. Well,
I get angry with him now. I get angry with him because a song that he loved, "Do You Want to Be a Spaceman" by Oasis. Some days I can put that on and really enjoy it. Some days I can put it on and it just brings all this back. And then I'm really cheesed off with him because it's a great song. Right? And I can't listen to it today, and I really wanted to. So I get pissed off with him for that.
No, I can understand that. I mean, with my dad, there's certain like music. Actually, weirdly, I think I'm sort of, in a way, I don't have that quite so much, only because I sort of feel like I've got a lot to thank my dad for with music and things like that, because I sort of believe that he, in a way, without actually, I don't think he was even trying to do it. It's just he really loved his music, and he loved his comedy as well. And I think without him really trying, he wasn't. He did shape the way he did shape my tastes in music in a way, and allowed me to explore music genres and stuff. And so, I always say that it wasn't a great upbringing that I had, because my mum and dad, they divorced when I was 11, I think it was. It wasn't great. My dad, towards the end of his life, he did actually admit to me that he wasn't a great parent and that he could have handled things better. Not many people knew that about him. Everyone knew that he wasn't a great parent and that he was awful to my mum. He didn't knock her about or anything, but he just everyone who knows my mum all wonder how him and her ever got together, because it's like so opposite. My mum's an absolute angel of a person, just without fault. She's just the most incredible woman you could ever meet in your life. And how him and her ever got together, everyone's clueless, but it happened. But I always say that in the formative years of my life, my dad, he was playing ELO. We were listening to Queen. We were listening to like old 70s rock. He allowed me and my brother to sit up and watch Monty Python. We were sitting up watching Not the 9 O'Clock News and all the comedy stuff that was coming on, and that really formed me with stuff that I love. And my brother, actually, I would argue, he would tell you that. And so I think, I've got a lot to thank my dad for, even though it wasn't really meant. So, I guess there's certain things that I would think, oh, yeah, my dad would love that, and that would set me off. He brought us up listening to Elton John, and I will never not love Elton John.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't, can you?
No.
Elton John doesn't make me feel sad. It just reminds me of times when I was little, really.
Yeah.
But what's the next? With depression. So it says a mixture of emotions can lead to depression. This can be mixed with anxiety and a general feeling of dread. Well, that's true. That dread, if you've got anxiety and depression, dread is something that it's that black dog. Have you ever heard about the expression black dog? It's so true. Yeah. And dread for me is that black dog.
Yeah.
If anyone doesn't know about the black dog, just Google about the black dog. It's almost like a metaphor for how depression and anxiety it's depression really, but how it makes you feel when you go through it. And it's so true. It says the suffering can be too much to bear and lead to the sufferer to question the point of carrying on and lead to wanting to be reunited with a person they've lost. Well, I haven't. That's not really something that it hasn't hit me that hard.
No.
I can imagine it would hit you hard if you lost a partner or a child. It would hit you that hard, I would imagine.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly from my experience of grieving. I don't think I have the kind of that. Definitely wasn't part of my journey. Depression, anxiety, yes, but depression, no, I don't think so. I think I didn't necessarily deal with what happened, my grief in the right way, and I think that any kind of depressive thoughts I had came from how I was dealing with it rather than what had happened. For the stages of grief, I'm sure it was probably there.
Yeah,
but I think it's clear to understand the difference between sadness and depression.
Yeah.
And I'm sure most people that are tuning into this will already understand that, because they will have an interest in mental health, and there is a big difference. But for me, there was a lot of sadness for a very long time, but I don't recall ever feeling depressed from the grief. I got depressed from the way that I dealt with the grief that I had.
Maybe,
arguably that's part of it, but
for all I know, it stands to reason for me that getting depression through grief, it doesn't matter how you get the depression, whether it's through other things that's making you have the. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm not really making myself clear. It's like I think that it's like all of these other stages of grief. It's like we've already said, haven't we, that these don't necessarily have to be in order.
No.
And one thing can cause another thing. So, for instance, one of these is anger. Now, if you're in the mindset of having depression, if you come to that conclusion, or no, not necessarily, if someone says to you, since blah, blah passed away, I think you're depressed. I think you're going through depression. I know about depression, and I think I've seen you go through it. If you're not of that mindset to be able to accept that, you're going to be angry.
Yeah. Do
you see what I mean? So I don't think that specific part... I think certain things can cause the other things to happen. Yeah,
and I think probably as well, it's almost one that you can almost control, right? Like you got all this other stuff going on. Oh, I'm shocked. I'm in denial. I'm angry. I'm blaming myself. Like, fuck, I'm not going to go into depression right now. And you just kind of maybe you go back into denial. I'm not depressed. Maybe I was depressed throughout.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm still in denial. Who knows? But it's
maybe if I'd have done this, then the depression wouldn't have happened.
Yeah,
which is the bargaining.
yeah, and you get yourself all caught up.
Yeah,
and
it's complicated.
It's complicated.
It's complex. It's a proper web.
Yeah, maybe we should have got a grief counsellor in.
Maybe we should. We don't know what we're talking about. Don't bloody listen to us. We're just talking out of old bollocks here. Yeah, the next one is acceptance and hope. And a quote I've put on here is, acceptance is about realising you can't change the circumstances, but that you can gain some control over how you respond. You can slip backwards in this because you can never be sure it's completely the right thing to do. You can become overwhelmed again. But I guess, like, you know, I said to you before that I decided to just be and just decided to let my body and my brain do what it needs to and just embrace what happens. Maybe that's part of the acceptance.
Yeah. My experience with the subject is we would always want to do something to mark the anniversary or do something to mark his birthday. And I remember one year, it must have only been last year, where I didn't want to do that anymore. I didn't want to mark his birthday. He's not here. And I kind of, I'll raise a glass, but I didn't want to meet up with everyone and celebrate his birthday. It didn't feel right, because he's not here. And first few years we did that. It was quite nice to meet up. Yeah. And the anniversary even more so. I got to a point where that day, it's 1st of December, that day needs to be about Advent starting again. That day needs to not be about that anymore. And I think that's when I realised that I'd accepted, that it had happened, and I accepted that life goes on. I remember year one was the first anniversary compared to the second anniversary. Year one was a breeze. The second one was tough.
Really?
Yeah, because
that's interesting.
Yeah, because year one, we did have a big thing for his birthday, and we did do a very big thing for the anniversary. All of my friends got together. We went and played some darts at a flight club, and then we went to karaoke, two of his favourite pastimes, darts and karaoke. And that was great. And I think there was this expectation on year two of having an equally good time. But I think everyone really struggled coming up to the anniversary. I think everyone felt this little bit of pressure to also mark the occasion, but wasn't going through maybe the stages of grief anymore. Almost feeling
and I guess I guess it's that realisation that you don't need to have these grand gestures of remembrance for you not to love him still.
And for me, when, going back to the acceptance bit, that's when I realised that I think I'm through the rough seas now of dealing with that. And that must have only been last year.
Do you know what? That's really interesting, though. The fact that you having that realisation that you're through with that to an extent, or to a greater or lesser extent, and the fact that you were right to have that conclusion because you didn't feel shit about it. You didn't feel a level of guilt, because if you got to that conclusion early, like sort of previous to when you actually to it, because you were trying to rush yourself through it, then sooner or later you'd either something had happened that would boot you up the arse, or you'd feel like a bit of an arsehole.
And initially I did when I said to a friend of mine, like, do you know what, I'd rather wouldn't meet up on the anniversaries. I'd rather just meet up with you. I think about the guy every day anyway. Yeah. Right, so I'd rather just meet up with you, not on that day, just for the sake of meeting up with you. But we can remember him any day. We can sit there and drink to him any day. I don't. I want that day back to be my day.
Yeah, and I guess as well, if you really think about him and how, if you were to talk to him about that, if you were able to say to him, he'd probably be totally cool with it.
Oh yeah,
he wouldn't
completely.
Want people.
He'd find it hilarious that I now think about him every day, because until we done this, I didn't.
No.
Right?
No.
And he'd find that hilarious.
Yeah.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah.
What's the final stage of grief?
It's processing. Apparently it varies from person to person and circumstances. It's important to know that this takes time, but there's no way of knowing how long. You need to be patient with yourself. Everyone is different. It goes back to what we said right at the beginning, I think, where we said that everyone's experience of grief is different. And it doesn't matter about the circumstances. Your experience is, and the way you process it with your mind is going to be very different to the next person. It's not linear at all.
No, it's not, and I think, like we've said throughout, there's certainly a generation where the view is you don't talk about your feelings. Keep calm, carry on, stiff upper lip, all of that jazz, and real men don't cry. And certainly from my experience that we've been talking about, a bunch of friends would get up and everyone would be at a different stage. Everyone would be feeling in a different way. And we learned to ask each other questions about how they're feeling, and we learned who not to ask about it because they didn't want to talk about it.
No.
Maybe when, for me, certainly I'd have pockets of friends that I'd have chats to about it, and some days they'd talk about it, some they wouldn't. So for me, it was difficult seeing a lot of friends grieve the same thing at the same time, but at a different pace.
I bet that got confusing though, didn't it?
Yeah, because there were certainly the funeral that everyone was in a completely different place. There were some of us that were just so damn pleased to get there, do it, get it over with. It's a couple of days before Christmas and just start cracking on with life.
Because you dread a funeral, don't you? You dread the funeral right up to the point of doing it.
Yeah, you do. And there was some that just didn't handle the funeral. And there was another one of my pals who never ever forget what he said, and it will always bounce around in my brain. He said, "We've all managed to take a day off work to come to this guy's funeral. Why can't we all take a day off and just go and see him?" Oh. Right? And it's just like, fuck me, man. Like,
that's gut wrenching, isn't it?
Yeah. It's gut wrenching because he's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you think that it was part of his anger processing?
For sure, yeah. Definitely. The one thing I will say about everyone gave each other the room they needed to grieve and get through it and to help. I think probably quite a few of us did seek help professionally at some point as well, and it would have definitely been the right thing to do. But one thing I wish I'd done was to do my own kind of research on how to deal with grief and whatnot, because there's lots of good stuff out there.
Yeah, oh God.
There's lots of good stuff out there.
No, I mean, as part of this, my research for this episode, because the thing is, it's like an absolute rabbit warren. If you're going to research organisations to go to, honestly, it's almost endless.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
It is a complete rabbit warren, and you almost have to go in each website. I've said to you before we started recording today, some of them are quite sort of area specific. I found one that was just for East Hertfordshire. I was thinking, well, I don't really understand the mentality of that. Surely you want to help people everywhere or help people in general.
I suppose if they're running kind of sessions to go to.
Yeah, and if they're only a small concern, I guess.
Yeah.
One that came up quite a lot was one called atalos.org, ATALOSS.org. It's what's called a signposting website for the bereaved. So it's almost like I guess you could call it a search engine, because the way it's quite clever the way they do it. You can put in the circumstances of your loss, and what it'll do is it'll point you towards organisations that deal with stuff like that. So, for instance, I did one searching on my dad dying of cancer, and I'm pretty sure there were ones that came up with cancer organisations. And it's not just organisations as well. It's such a lovely thing. I had no idea that existed before this.
No.
Which is an awful thing to say, given that what I've been through, I had absolutely no idea. They point you towards advice. They point you towards biographical information of people that have been through this and have lived in a certain way, and then you can read about their experiences. They give you literature recommendations, so things like books and stuff that you can read that might, self-help books and stuff that might help you. Articles, blogs, website resources. The good thing about it being so much and being a bit of a rabbit warren is that there's literally something on there for everyone. It's such a lovely thing. It's such a great idea.
And what's that called again?
Atalos. So that's ATALOSS.org. If I just read their thing that they said, it says Atalos helps bereaved people find support and well-being. So I love the fact that they're looking at well-being as well, not just like telling you this is going to happen, this has happened. But it says our vision is that no bereaved person in the UK should be left floundering or alone and unable to find support when they need it. We want there to be universal routine referrals so that everyone can find timely, appropriate and effective support in the interests of their mental and physical health, as well as practical, financial, social and spiritual well-being. It's a really lovely thing, really. I really love that.
That's good. And I suppose, Alan, like, if someone's in denial, if you're seeing a loved one grieving and they're at the denial stage, getting them to do something like that could be really difficult. I found some great information on the internet, which is basically questions that you could ask a friend or a loved one who's grieving. There's a lot of good stuff on here, and some of it's quite subtle, and I think this is some of these are important. And the number one question here is, how can I help you when you feel overwhelmed? Again, it's an open question to get someone talking. There's other ones on here. What is it that gives you comfort right now? So you're not actually tackling the subject of why they're grieving. It's again, an open question. There's no yes or no answer. And do you want to talk? Would you like to join me for lunch or a coffee today? Another one on here. I'm here to help with some chores. Do you need any help in the backyard? Just usual things. So it's not always going for that obvious, do you want to talk about it?
Yeah.
Are you feeling sad about losing a loved one? What is it that's making you sad about that? It's really casual stuff. And also with the same questions, there's a lot of stuff about self-reflection, about grief. And doing this research, I've gone through them and certainly come to my own conclusion at the end. And the first question here, I'll read them out. Did I feel like I needed to hide my grief, or could I grieve honestly? Much to what we've spoken about. Are we angry on the outside, or are we angry on the inside? And the next question on here, what feelings am I most uncomfortable with right now? Certainly something I never did. That question, I think if I read that at the time where I've experienced grief, I might have been able to come to some better kind of resolve about where I am on the 7 stages of grief.
Yeah.
But I would have ignored this stuff. I've been like, no, I deal with it in my own time, But if I asked myself these sort of questions, I might have got somewhere a little bit quicker. Who can I count on to help me through my grief? Now, for me, I definitely become very insular. This was my grief to have. Yeah. You don't know what I'm going through.
Yeah.
I certainly went through stages with that. Certainly those around me were going through something as well.
Yeah. No, I mean, at the time when my dad passed away, January before that, my really good friend, her mum had passed away. So towards the end of last year, and we still do meet up now, it's really lovely. We've been best of friends for years and years. But it was really lovely because she was able to sort of really empathise with the way I was feeling, and she knows me really, really well anyway. That was a really lovely thing, and I feel so lucky for that. So lucky. But the other thing as well is that 2 of my oldest friends, when my dad passed away, 2 of my oldest, most loveliest friends, the day after my dad passed away, I remember getting up and my friend Ian, who lives the road from me and he's part of my friend group, he came round and he brought some booze round because he'd lost his dad 15 years before. So he knew what it was like to go through it as a bloke, and he's such a lovely guy. But my other 2 friends, they said, right, we're going out for a drink. We're going to go out.
I'm going to throw a question at you here.
Yeah.
Right. Why is it that blokes do that? When they get bad news, that they want to drink? See, I think I know the reason why.
I think historically it's like, I don't think I'm like this really, and I don't know if they are really, but I think historically, with a couple of beers inside you, you're going to be a bit more open to talk about stuff, and there's not going to be that element of wanting to hide your feelings. Yeah, there's no inhibitions. Or there are inhibitions, but not in the same way, and you're going to feel better about talking about it.
For me, the answer for me personally, and I'm probably for many, my best friend lost his dad to cancer earlier this year.
Yeah.
I knew the guy over 20 years. He was like another dad to me at times, And when I found out he was ill, so before he passed away, when he was ill, I wanted to be upset about it. I wanted to get upset because I liked the guy. So I come home from work that day and I had this permanent lump in my throat all day, and I wanted to cry.
Yeah.
I wanted to do that.
Yeah.
So I got home, I drank whiskey and I listened to sad music until it come out.
Yeah.
So for me, it was the catalyst to get me to cry.
Yeah.
Once I'd had a cry, I felt a little bit better, and I felt like I could be a better emotional support to my friend as a result. So for me, I think it's the way to get the emotion out that we are conditioned as
this
men
pressure.
to
Yeah.
keep inside us.
There's this almost this internal like air pressure holding all of this angst and all of this emotion in. And regardless of how enlightened you think you are never ever going to get that out unless you force it out.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how open I think I am with my mental health and the way I'm feeling with people. None of that matters. That is going to stay there until you literally force that out.
You got to get it out, right?
Yeah.
And it, rightly or wrongly, I was in the office when I had this news, and there's no way I'm crying in the office, right? I take this news, I take it home, and I deal with it there. For me, it's almost not okay to cry there, right? But I can go home, I can drink half a bottle of whiskey, cry, tell people I went home and drank half a bottle of whiskey, and I cried. They're like, good for you.
Yeah.
You needed to do that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But it's bizarre, and
It's
why
crackers.
we're here today,
Yeah.
right? Because we are conditioned. Keep that in you. Keep
And
that
it's
in
so
you.
ingrained
Keep
as
that in
well.
you. Drink,
Yeah.
and then you can cry.
Yeah.
You're a man now. You
Yeah,
can
yeah.
cry because you've had a drink.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I always class myself as, I'm not as enlightened as I think I am. Absolutely no fucking way.
No.
It's bullshit.
No.
You know, I might be open and upfront with things more than maybe the next bloke or blokes that I know, but it doesn't make it a lot easier for me to be able to express myself. I mean, that day my dad passed away, I remember blimey, well, it's a long story short. When he passed away, I was still on my own. Me and my brother had been estranged for a couple of years, and I contacted him and said, "Oh, can we meet for a coffee just to chat about Dad?" Met up. It was very nice. It was nice to see him again, and we just spoke about Dad and decided what we were going to do next. Next steps and whatnot. It was very nice. It wasn't an effort. It was really lovely, to be fair. Got home. Eventually, everyone came home from school. Kids went up to their bedrooms like teenagers do. And I remember Nicola was out in the kitchen. I was laying on the settee because I was just so tired. Laying on the settee, me and the dog. And I did feel emotional, but I was more like just completely burnt out. I was just completely spent. And I decided unconsciously to listen to, because I've got this, it's a bit sad, but I really do love sad music. I really do love easy listening stuff. I find it really soothes me when I'm trying to do something else. And I've got this massive playlist that I've had for years. It's got to be nearly 8.5 hours long. No word of exaggeration, right? So I had that going. Anyway, Nicola came into the room and she said, "Why on earth are you listening to music like this?" And I said to her, and this is what I thought I was listening to music, that kind of music. So, well, my brain can't take anything faster or louder. What I actually was listening to that music for was because I must have felt this pressure inside. I just needed to open that valve. And I remember the song Father and Son by Cat Stevens.
Yeah.
And I've always loved that song. And in the ups and downs that me and my dad have had, there's a couple of songs that have always sort of really helped me through it. And that was one of them. And it got to that song, and then that was it.
Yeah.
And do you know what? Genuinely, right? That was the saddest. It sounds really simplistic, and it sounds very simplistic, but that was literally the saddest I've ever felt in my whole life. I've never, even as a kid, cried like that. My face felt awful. It was almost like someone had literally wrung my face out. I've never felt like that in my whole life, but it must have done me good.
See, I've got a song when I want to feel sad, when I want to cry. Right, the song is The First Time I Ever Saw Your Face.
Oh my God!
But the
Yeah.
uncle version.
Oh
yeah, I mean
I must listen to that.
It's a sad old song. You should listen to the uncle version.
I should, yeah.
Go steady though.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
because it's sadder.
Yeah.
But yeah, great
Yeah,
song.
no, it's yeah, it's funny, isn't it? But it's like, like with everything, sensory, it can bring back so much more than what you realise.
And back to what we were saying, music. Do You Want to Be a Spaceman by Oasis?
Yeah.
That can either make me reflect on the relationship I had with my friend, or today that tune doesn't sit well with me. You bloody bastard, you've ruined it for me.
Yeah.
Which leads to this question just staring right at me now on my notes. Will I ever get over my grief? And I think that's how we started today's show. And I think probably more so now after... look, we don't script these things, we just chat. And I'm sure you probably realise that, because if we scripted this, then our writing skills should probably be questioned. But I think the answer is no.
No,
I think, again...
It's really hard to come to accept that, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. And maybe part of the acceptance. But I think you're right. It scrambles around. And I think whenever you attend a funeral, sometimes you're there and you reflect on yourself, you reflect on the person, and you reflect on everyone that you've lost. And I think it can swirl these emotions around again and again. Will you ever get over your grief? No, but you learn to manage it.
Yeah, you learn to live with it.
As humans, we're great survivors, and we learn how to cope.
Yeah.
And that's certainly how I feel about the situation that we've discussed today. I've learned how to cope with it, how to deal with it, and it's just become part of everyday life.
Well, I'm still on my journey with it in a way. Really, it's only just been over a year. I think it's valuable for people to know. Weirdly, it was through a podcast that's actually really helped me through everything, to accept everything. And actually, I would argue maybe it was this podcast I'm just about to speak about that made me realise that I just needed to just be, just not try to be anything other than how I'm feeling in that second, and then be how I'm feeling in the following second. And just be how you want to be, or how you feel like being. And it's the Griefcast by Carrie Lloyd, which, even if you haven't been through heavy grief or whatever, it's such a valuable listen. She speaks to people like comedians, actors, writers about their experiences of grief. And it's so valuable to listen to other people's perspectives based on their experience of what they've been through. It's so valuable. And it really allowed me to realise that and start my acceptance of the fact that I will always have grief, and that it's just a case of just living with it and living around it. That's such a huge thing for me. I don't think, had I have not been listening to that, I don't think I'd be handling things as well as I have done. I really don't. And it sounds really pretentious, but genuinely, I would recommend it. And it's, as I say, it's the Griefcast by Carrie Lloyd. It's so good. It's really good. And the lovely thing about it is that because of the subject matter, you can dip in and out of it. So I would never profess to say, I've listened to every episode. No, I've only listened to episodes either about circumstances where people have lost people that are relevant to my experience, or people who I look up to. For instance, the Jimmy Carr one is incredible. The David Baddiel one is amazing. People like that, people, heroes of mine, and that I found that through listening to them and them talk about it, it's really allowed me to deal with things in a more healthy way, I think, than had I done. I'm not saying I'm entirely dealing with things entirely healthy, but it's a long road, isn't it? It's a long road. I think, my family would probably say that I am easier to live with now than I was, but I would literally just, fly off the handle. And I guess that, looking at those 7 stages of grief in inverted commas, that's the anger.
Easier, but not easy.
What do you mean?
To live with.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
it was
no.
A joke. It was a joke, Alan.
No, I'm not that easy to live with, I've got to be honest. No, I'm lazy git and grumpy. But no, I think I am... The parts that got worse through going through this are actually slightly easier now, I would argue, for them. Possibly, I hope. I think they are. But it's like we said, it's peaks and troughs, isn't it? And actually, with not just with grief, but with any kind of mental health journey, like experience. It's the key to peaks and troughs is knowing that when you're on the way to a peak and when you're on your way to a trough.
And embrace it.
Yeah, and embrace it and accept it, and then use that experience for the next time.
Absolutely.
This has been the Go2Him podcast with Alan Corbett and Nick Catt. You can email us on Go2Him@outlook.com with comments and subjects you might want us to cover. Don't forget to recommend us to anyone you think might benefit. See you for the next one, and thanks for your time.